Reading through the script again, I'm noticing a pattern in how I introduce characters. I forget to talk about them until they're relevant. And why not make a full-fledged tradition and talk about the next party member and heavy weapons gal, Lacune. Before I start, I figured I should put another spoiler warning here because the wiki page for Lacune is just... wow. There's more redacted text here than 1,000 SCPs put together. Which is ironic because the characters in Project Horizons may have entire epics dedicated to their development and description, but they're quite focused in concept and design. I already talked about the 5 pillars of Blackjack's character, but all the party members can be summed up in a few sentences if needed. Missing all the nuance, subtext, intrigue, pacing, and S-tier writing the story is stuffed to the brim with, but still. They're simple enough to be identifiable and digestible, but complicated enough there's still room for character development after the 100 or so hours of non-stop reading. Double that if you're reading out loud. P21 is a family man at heart who's terrified of having a family. Morning Glory is a patriot whose identity gets steamrolled and spends the rest of her life building a new one. Blackjack is a fucking idiot, and Rampage is an even bigger fucking idiot. All that being said, the best way to describe Lacune would be one who was given the failures of a generation and learned from them in a way they never thought to. Remember Mr. House's famous quote on the fate of democracies? It's actually kind of funny, since pre-war America was a fascist totalitarian oligarchy with a military that had so much political power they were effectively a separate nation, eventually seceding and becoming the Enclave, who were such apocalyptic level morons they eventually elected a leader named Richard Richardson or Dick Dixon, depending on how juvenile their sense of humor is. The point is, even though getting back to the pre-war status quo is the goal of Fallout Equestria to a certain extent, it really shouldn't be. Not only are they lacking a substitute for the demigoddess diarchy pre-war Equestria was so reliant upon, but need I remind you how that turned out 9 times out of 10? This entire world is a second chance, a chance to do better. But there's one faction that ironically vehemently refuses to take that chance. The faction Lacune hails from, the Goddess. For the uninitiated, the Goddess is a bona fide master from Fallout 1. Through a series of memory orbs in K-Cat's original, we find out that Trixie Lulumoon never recovered from her humiliation in Season 1 or got redeemed in Season 3. The timeline splits in Season 2 after all. Instead, a few weeks before the last day, she was contacted by Twilight and offered a job working for the Ministry of Arcane Science at Maripony. When the bombs fell, she fell into a vat of impelled metamorphosis potion and ended up the dominant consciousness in a newly formed hive mind dubbed Unity. This is all par for the course when it comes to K-Cat's philosophy about fusing Fallout and MLP. Borrow ideas from Fallout and seamlessly sew them into MLP's universe so well I couldn't tell the difference. Now having played Fallout 1, of course this mirrors the Master's story to a T. Weirdly enough, I actually recognized the plot elements from Fallout Equestria and basically had the exact opposite experience I assume K-Cat had when building Fallout Equestria. Anyway, in Project Horizons, Sombra does what Sombra does best and goes a little bit farther with the concepts introduced into FOE proper. Now, as the Goddess's dominant consciousness, Trixie bears the emotional burdens of every consciousness incorporated into the hive mind. And having lived with her own extensive list of failures her whole life, she wants nothing to do with it. So when a scouting party encounters Hoofington and the soul-sucking innervation that comes with it, she uses the opportunity to cut herself off from her failures indefinitely. Since Unity is effectively a single ultra-powerful soul spread across hundreds of alicorn bodies, having an alicorn that's still connected to Unity in an innervation field would basically suck up every soul in Unity through that one alicorn like a continent-spanning bendy straw. So Trixie decides to send in a single alicorn cut off from Unity to scout out Hoofington, bearing every part of Unity she doesn't want to think about anymore. Every failure, flop, and fuck-up of every soul in Unity created a new entity that named itself Lacune, plural of lacuna meaning empty or unfilled space, originating from the Latin word for lake or pool. And just like Blackjack, who took her own failures to heart and decided to do better, Lacune took the failures she was made from and decided to do better. Aside from that heaping helping of character development, Lacune contributes on a chapter-by-chapter basis by rounding out the main cast into a 5-man band, with Scotch Tape and or Boo playing Tagalong Kid. This is actually one of my favorite tropes in media thanks to how much natural chemistry it brings to the group of characters involved. Granted, it was kind of already an effective 5-man band without her since both P21 and Glory share the role of the smart guy in addition to Lancer and Hart, but since you learn from your mistakes and nobody's made of more mistakes than Lacune, I'd say she's a welcome addition that adds more experience and wisdom than P21 or Glory ever did. Plus it allows P21 to be a focused foil for Blackjack and Glory to be more of an emotional heart, which I think was a good call. Nobody's stepping on each other's toes here, both because their characters are so well defined and because ponies don't have them. Fun fact. Anyway, I don't know how to end this Lacune section, so you know what that means. It's time to resume YouTube's favorite segment, the List of Suffering. Last we left Blackjack, she was at Watcher's Cave, emotionally recovering from the slaughter of 99 and the events at Star Point. The following chapter is super touching and basically seals Blackjack's eventual fate as an unkillable agent of fate, but that doesn't matter right now. On the way back to the rest of the party, she encounters a few Grand Pegasus Enclave members, the perfect warm-up for getting back on the emotional belt sander. Chapter 24. Broke multiple ribs, dislocated a knee, and got slugged by shock gauntlets. Chapter 25. Got beaten unconscious in a gladiator ring and watched P-21 nearly hang himself with razor wire. Quick aside, it may seem a bit odd that P-21 is able to weather all of the emotional splash damage Blackjack infallibly attracts, but Blackjack's suicide attempt is what puts him over the edge. However, I would point you back to the quote that bookends Book 1. The subject is Blackjack, but it says more than you might think about P-21.
You take the hard road no matter how damn much it hurts you, and I can only watch in awe that you keep walking it.
Pay attention to the wording here. I can only watch in awe, as if that's the only thing he's capable of doing. By this point, P-21's entirely self-sufficient. He could leave the party, settle in chapel with Priest, who I completely forgot about, but here's some cool fan art of him. Wow, look at that. Doesn't that give you a complete image of his character? Just pretend it does, because he's not the focus right now. P-21 is, and his happy ending is a life in chapel with Priest. However, he can't do that without getting some closure for 99, so he stays in the party. Then when they finally get to 99, compared to Blackjack, he's useless. Hey, his words, not mine. On top of that completely unjustified inferiority complex, he blames himself for 99's failure. Not being able to save the other males, not being able to convince them to join him. He arguably takes 99 worse than Blackjack does. But it's failing to save Blackjack that pushed his guilt to suicidal levels. To be honest, I wasn't going to spend more than a few sentences talking about this scene, but rereading it messed me up more than I was expecting to. The consequences of 99 are as far-reaching as they are heart-wrenching. The other major event of Chapter 25 is Book 2's namesake, and since Crazed Rambling disappeared off the face of the earth, that means I get to voice quotes now. So, what do you see when you look at me? Blood and stars. Blood of the innocent. Blood of the guilty. Fresh blood, cold blood, old blood. You're standing in a river of the stuff. It's flowing through you. Gives you strength. It's also tearing you away and drowning you. And for all the blood that's soaking you through and through, it's nothing compared to all the bloodshed you're going to prevent. I also see stars above you, stars beneath you, stars within you. You're made of stars. Bloody stars. This is probably the best way to describe Blackjack's character on a larger scale. She sheds blood and shapes destinies with every step she takes. She's the blood-soaked reaper at the center of everything. Kind of like a post-war Golden Blood, who I was totally waiting to talk about until I made the comparison and didn't forget about like the total spaz I've proven myself to be time and time again. No, that'd be freaky, wacky, weirdo, dude. Golden Blood is a difficult character to talk about because I'm not even sure if he knew everything about him. The guy was as mysterious as they come. If I had to sum him up in a single sentence, I'd probably go with something like a man who saw the world, died, and spent the rest of his unnatural life trying to save that world, unwittingly destroying it in the process. Golden Blood was born in Zabrinnica, the zebra homelands, and knew more about their culture than any other pony. When he moved to Equestria, he was instantly enamored and learned all he could about it, but from an outsider's perspective. This unusual upbringing gave Golden Blood a unique viewpoint on the state of the world that made him exceedingly qualified in political science, eventually using it to build Equestria's ministry system from the ground up at Luna's request. In short, he was the catalyst that pushed Equestria into Fallout Equestria, and this is where a lot of folks take issue with the character. Golden Blood had a hoof in basically everything pre-war, and that includes everything KCAT created. Instead of building Project Horizons as an expansion to the original, Golden Blood basically serves as a soft but universal retcon to the entire equestrian government. The ministry system? That was him. The Little Horn Massacre? He was there. Gardens of Equestria? Actually, Golden Blood came up with the idea and funded the project and wiped Twilight's memory once he was finished.
The Mary Sue in any of her forms is the center of everything. The distinction is that a Mary Sue warps the way the world works around them. Glorifying the Sue is prioritized over maintaining the established characterizations or the straight-up rules of reality.
He comes dangerously close to Gary Stunis in the way the plot seems to bend around him. But honestly, I think he's more of a necessary evil for the kind of story Somber wanted to tell. Say you wanted to have a bunch of secret government projects for the main character to unearth over the course of the plot. Where do you put them? The ministries were pretty well explored in the original, and there wasn't a lot of room for new developments, except for one. The Office of Interministry Affairs, or the OIA, was established in the original but barely expanded upon, and when you already have a perfect plot device to add whatever you want to all 6 ministries, all Somber needed was someone at the center of everything. Golden Blood might be somewhat of a Gary Stu by definition, but he's far from a poorly written character. To be honest, I think a lot of the hate surrounding him comes from him being romantically involved with Fluttershy. Curse of the waifu stealer, I suppose. He's even got a yellow coat. Weird. Anyway, that was pretty analytical, wasn't it? This many minutes and nothing earth-shatteringly traumatic happened outside of P21 and the barbed wire thing. Well, guess what, bucko? We don't get nice things, and neither does Blackjack, because Chapter 26 is yet another wham chapter. In Chapter 26, she, A, got all her leg bones shattered by a sonic wave. B, regrew said leg bones, but with the consistency of rubber, effectively crippling her. C, ran into a room full of living wires that she had to shoot with a handgun that had the firepower of a nuke. D, got exposed to near flesh-melting levels of enervation, an invisible energy that literally sucks the soul from your body. Nearly went insane in the process. E, watched Glory's wing fall off due to enervation. She sat down and started begging for death halfway through. And F, watched Lacune turn into an empty shell through the enervation. This won't be the last time Blackjack has a brush with something way out of her league. In a video game context, Chapter 26 is Blackjack stumbling into an area she's severely underleveled for and barely making it out alive. The Massive Living Wires is actually an endgame villain whose name we won't even hear until the next book, much less understand or defeat. And the enervation is an extension of an eldritch cosmic horror, an undead star hell-bent on subjugating all sentient life into an uber-mega hell where their souls are eternally shattered and stitched back together only to be shattered again. Does this sound like a Book 2 villain? Well, it might. I've been given pretty vague descriptions of them. I only said Deus was a cyborg, but that could still mean anything from a prosthetic Pinky to Raiden. Anyway, the excessive amounts of suffering here are a great character development tool for the next member of the party, who doesn't have the luxury of an adjustment period like Blackjack had. Instead of wading into the kiddie pool like a normal girl her age, she's shoved off an iceberg into some of the worst experiences the Wasteland has to offer. And I hate that I really like her characterization. That's right, I've upgraded from glorifying teenage suffering to suffering of a literal 8-year-old. Kind of. You know what, this deserves its own paragraph. I've got time, and this entire video is a tangent to this series, which is tangential to this channel, which is tangential to my creative output, which is a tangent to my mental state, which is a tangent to my life. This is a whole Mandelbrot set of obscurity and interconnectedness. The exact age of the characters in nearly every MLP-related piece of media are left vague intentionally. Characters have to be old enough to live independently, but they still need to be young enough for the target audience to project onto them, but then you have to consider how ponies age and whether they even use our calendar, and it all becomes very messy very quickly. But we have enough clues to narrow it down by a fair margin. Somber has said Blackjack, when she left Stable 9, was the same age as Twilight in Season 1, and Scotchtape was the same age as Sweetie Belle. This should be a definitive answer, but all it really does is give me a lot more hearsay and guesswork to sift through. The online consensus for Twilight's age is around 17 or 18, appropriate for a young student who's still old enough to live on her own. This also lines up with Somber's other answer of 15 to 18. Sweetie Belle is a bit more complicated. For one thing, she's voiced by an actual child, so that gives us a good idea of how old the voice director thought she was. At the time of Sweetie Belle's debut, her voice actress was 11 years old. Not definitive by any means, but valuable information nonetheless. There's also the matter of her cutie mark. Cutie marks are already a metaphor for puberty, so it's not that much of a stretch that ponies get their cutie marks around 11 or 12, same as humans. Estimates in the fandom go as early as 8, but I'll stick with 11 for now. However, there's one paragraph in Chapter 21 of the sequel to Project Horizons, followed Equestria Homelands, that throws all of this into disarray. It kind of lampshades this issue, but here's the basic gist of it. There are 2 major time skips in Homelands, and 1 in Project Horizons. Blackjack spends 3 months in the core, Scotchtape spends 1 year in the Hoof after Project Horizons' final chapter, and Scotch spends 1 year in Rice River, another town in the Zebra Homelands. Now, there are a lot of minor time skips in Homelands, but none are longer than a few weeks, so we'll get them when we get there. The math still puts Scotchtape age at anywhere from 14 to 16 at this moment, which might be close enough to Blackjack's age to qualify as almost, but only with the most liberal estimates from both ends. All in all, I feel like this paragraph was specifically put in to annoy people who complain about a timeline that's intentionally left vague, and goddamn did it work on me. Since there's no calendar or exact year counting or whatever, I'm just gonna assume ponies age like The Sims, and Scotchtape just leveled up from child to teen to young adult over the course of Homelands. Anyway, yes, Scotchtape. Now that I've spent 2 paragraphs talking about how old she is, I should have a lot to say about the rest of her, right? Well, I will, later. In Homeland, she gets a mountain of character development as the main protagonist, but strictly in Horizons, it feels like the point of her character is that she's a blank slate. Not entirely, she's still got a fondness for engineering, a healthy dose of that stable 99 trauma, and a ton of cute character quirks, but she's still a child, and she actually acts like one. She's the little sister that Blackjack never had and Rampage had given up on. In other words, she's the catalyst for the best trope of all time, Found frickin' family. And as much as I would love for them to go back to chapel and start a coffee shop or whatever, we don't get nice things. We get character development. The impressionable youth takes after Blackjack, for better or for worse, and goes with her on a mission to save Glory directly after her trip through the tunnel of hell. Yes, it's stupid, yes, it's dangerous, and yes, it's got a 99% chance of fatal injury, but it's exactly what Blackjack would do. The difference being Blackjack does it out of guilt and her self-destructive tendencies, while Scotch only does it because Blackjack does it. All it ends up giving her is even more trauma, this time of the murder because I had to variety. This is somewhat of a reoccurring theme. Blackjack may be the protagonist, but she's not a good role model. She's barely a good person. I feel like it's the ultimate bait and switch to make this badass, awesome, smooth as hell protagonist OC that would normally be a hair short of an isekai protagonist with how self-insert they sound, and then just turn around and say, by the way, she's a war criminal who's murdered at least 50 children. And this isn't implied through subtext or anything. Well, it is, but Blackjack regularly and repeatedly has people yell at her for being a stupid, impulsive bastard who hurts the wasteland just as much as she helps it. She's the chemotherapy Huffington needs, but only once she's dead can it start to heal. She can't even help Glory when she loses her wing. Only by walking up to the Enclave and demanding her sister talk to her can she pull her over the despair event horizon. It goes as well as you'd expect. Stupid plan, works anyway, but with heavy losses. Like I said, Blackjack's actions may help in the short term, but they're far from sustainable. Case in point, when she heals an extension of a megalomaniacal dictator she thought was her friend, it ends up saving someone who would go on to save more, but if Little Pip didn't kill the goddess later on, Lukune would have likely killed Blackjack and anybody else who got in the goddess's way. But hey, the healing process is a really damn cool scene, so I'd say it's justified either way. When Blackjack links minds with Lukune to bring her out of the catatonic state she's in, she plunges headfirst into the ocean of soul fragments she was built from. A few fragments are a majority of the original soul and retain enough consciousness to manifest and talk to Blackjack. Basically, she gets to talk to the parts of Unity that the goddess didn't want. This includes a handful of Twilight, Psalm, and even Trixie herself. Every encounter is chilling and telling in its own way. Psalm's overwhelming guilt for killing hundreds in the name of a goddess that's been dead for 2 centuries. Trixie's complete humiliation, shame, and failure she endured for years, barely earning enough to pay rent, let alone buy food. And Twilight, a former protagonist resigned to spending an eternity lamenting how everything went so wrong. And it's within this dark whirlpool of hate, pity, and regret that Blackjack can do something nobody else could. Relate, empathize, and forgive. Lukune may be made of failure, but you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who's failed as much as Blackjack has. I mean, seriously, did you see the list? So in a mindscape of pure thought and motion, they hug it out, accept their fears and failure, and salvage what they can. It's a really good scene, balancing plot with emotion with fan service and giving plenty of each. Blackjack even learns to accept how small her horn is a little bit at the end. I didn't mention it, but this has been a running gag since chapter 1, so that was some fantastic comic relief when I really needed it. Anyway, what follows is some great world building rounding out the Zodiac clan of bounty hunters. Honestly, this entire section is just delightful because of the whole theming thing. I'm a sucker for theme naming, so this team of diverse OCs, which barely have any plot significance, gives me nothing but joy. Sagittarius is the serious team leader who uses a bow with magic-tipped arrows. Taurus blew stuff up and shot anything that climbed out of the crater. Gem and Minai are walking Matrix Reloaded references with charmingly laid-back personalities for being assassins, making their deaths actually effective even if they didn't even last 1 chapter. Ares has a red suit of power armor complete with twin flamethrowers. Aquarius mostly supports Ares, making a very literal red Oni blue Oni pair. Leo's a sniper who used to own Glory's signature weapon before he got his ass kicked by Rampage. Capricorn and Pisces, 2 cursed sea ponies whose wiki pages are 99% identical. Virgo, a mad scientist who's street dumb enough to be tricked by Blackjack, who used to have a brain but then she killed it and whined about it afterward. Libra, who exists, allegedly. Cancer, a big ol' sentry bot who has a sideways 69 on its armor. And Scorpio, a zebra who enjoys zebra things, like using a zebra rifle and being a zebra. Sure, some members have more character than others, but I love these guys. A worthy addition to the supporting cast, and so much free space in their wiki pages they're practically begging for a spin-off. Come on, Somber, followed Equestria's Zodiac. Show us how Silver Stripe survived the wasteland, met Sagittarius, and even came up with this crazy idea for a Zodiac-themed group of bounty hunters. Or make that part a flashback and make it about Sagittarius leading the Zodiac clan after Project Horizons. You know you wanna. Then, Scotch Tape gets traumatized again, and it kicks off her and Rampage's entire character arcs. The tunnel wire demon, mixed with seeing Dr. Zodiac's physical body of wires and decaying flesh, leads to a full panic attack that makes her black out. The gang starts discussing possible solutions, and Triage mentions memory therapy. On a surface level, it seems like the perfect solution. No more bad memories, no more trauma. It's like the past few chapters never happened. But then Rampage spits out her very own catchphrase. Not remembering sucks. As terrible as it is, I wish I remembered killing Thorn. And because it would feel like I actually did it. Then my guilt would be justified, but I think about it and all I remember is crying and then nothing. And the next thing I remember, Blackjack got me disintegrated and every pony was pissed and Thorn was... I'd give anything to remember so I could understand why. As it turns out, Rampage is completely right here. You can't just erase character development like that. This also kind of ties back to Lacune being better for remembering what the goddess didn't want to. Scotch Tape didn't deserve the tunnels. None of them did, but you can't quick save in real life and you can't hear either. The only way to move on is to acknowledge the trauma, come to terms with it, and find your own way to dig yourself out. With the memory therapy, Scotch Tape feels trapped in a hole she doesn't even know why she's in. The trauma persists, and not remembering sucks. I would know, because the next few chapters, as fun as they are not especially relevant to the overarching story. I liked reading them, but I sure as hell can't remember them. There was a Golden Blood fake-out that got a chuckle out of me, there's a Glory Death fake-out that got a gasp out of me, some more world building for when they finally go to Thunderhead later. They meet Keeper, one of the old main six, whose members include Big Daddy, Dr. Zodiac, Crunchy Carrots, Dawn, and King Awesome, but my god, this story is just too big for me. I love each and every one of these characters, and they all end up mattering in some way, but I needed to check the wiki so many times because it somehow never got through to me that I should have been taking notes on every name mentioned by anyone because they will come back, and they will be important. And I know I should have expected that, but this is beyond anything I could have expected. This story's insane length defines it in so many ways, and it's a huge part of why I love it so much, but it also makes an adequate summary impossible. Horizon Labs is a really good showcase of body horror and lore building and how it viscerally explains the cost of Blackjack's trump card and hints at how enervation works, but it's completely skipped in the wiki's summary. What I'm saying is, around chapter 30, myself and a lot of readers were feeling a bit exhausted. Hell, even Blackjack was feeling a bit exhausted. But she stuck it out, and so did I, and I'm glad I did, because 2 chapters later, we see that exhaustion pushed to a breaking point and a transcendent catharsis take over, as Book 2 comes to a close. Chapter 31 opens with some comic relief, and is the last moment of brevity before Blackjack's climactic battle with Book 2's big bad, a Steel Ranger radical named Steel Rain. Steel Rain is not a very complex villain. He fits firmly into the pure evil archetype. His motivations are power, control, and domination over Huffington, and his membership in the Steel Rangers is only to achieve that end. And I kinda love him. Every other villain in this story has some sort of sympathetic quality, a backstory or motivation that makes the audience look at them as more than an obstacle for the hero to overcome. Deus was essentially being torn apart with every step he took, and worked for Sanguine because he was the only one who could make strong enough painkillers. Sanguine himself only tracked down Blackjack to break his family out of stasis. Cognitum's just an AI following its programming. Lighthooves is lashing out at a world that wronged him. Even the Eater of Souls is eating souls because it's afraid to die. But Steel Rain? He wants power. No real reason, he just wants it. His motivation still makes sense, it's just really, really simple. And simple can be fun. He serves his purpose as an active threat really well too. Whenever he shows up, Blackjack and co are usually running for the hills or barely making a stalemate. And what precedes a simple dumb fun villain? A simple dumb fun hero in the form of Paladin Stronghoof, who I love beyond words. This himbo supreme Full Metal Alchemist reference whose mere existence validates how much time I've poured into the story. Every line out of his mouth made me smile from ear to ear. This is why I unironically love the medium of fanfiction. It's writing, indulgence, and fun for its own sake. It's like the difference between the fanciest pizzeria in Italy versus whatever I order at Mod Pizza. The Italian's objectively better, and more people will enjoy it. I might even choose it over Mod sometimes. But I will be dead and gone before I apologize for ordering olive, spicy sausage, buffalo sauce, onions, and jalapeno pizza, because that pizza's mine. This beautiful mess that nobody with functioning taste buds would touch just so happens to be exactly what I want to eat most of the time. And it hurts. I'm not gonna lie to you and say it's painless to eat the culinary equivalent of a neutron star, or that some chapters of Project Horizons aren't going to mess you up something fierce, but if I may borrow a page from Mae Borowski, I get it. This won't stop until I die. But when I die, I want it to hurt. When my friends leave, when I have to let go, when this entire town is wiped off the map, I want it to hurt. Bad. I want to lose. I want to get beaten up. I want to hold on until I'm thrown off and everything ends. And you know what? Until that happens, I want to hope again. And I want it to hurt. Because that means it meant something. It means I am something. At least, pretty amazing to be something, at least. In Chapter 27, Blackjack went through hell and back twice to save Glory and Lacune. In 28, she lost part of Scotch Tape Rampage and P-21 all in one go. In 29, she massacred an entire caravan and watched Glory's apparent death. In 30, she had a tumor ripped out of her eye socket. In 31, she got the snot kicked out of her by Pony Armstrong, anti-dragon shells, and a living tank. And in Chapter 32, she nearly joined an Eldritch a cappella group, annihilated a battleship, and had said battleship fall on her. And that brings us to Chapter 33. While 32 was the final battle against Hoofington Steel Rangers, 33 is where Book 2's final moments lay. And to be perfectly honest, it's kinda perfect. For one thing, the title of Black is very fitting. Blackjack lost one eye in the tunnels and the other eye to Steel Rains, so she's completely blind throughout all of Chapter 33. The only visuals we do get are from her feverish nightmares of a world where she wasn't there to stop the creeping evil that permeates Hoofington. A few memory orbs are thrown in there too, but for the most part the scenes are described with sound and touch alone. After firing Trottenheimer's Folly to blow up the HMS Celestia, she was imbued with enough taint to change her body and soul into something that wasn't really a pony anymore. Her legs didn't have enough blood running through them, her respiratory system was all kinds of fucked up, and near the end of the chapter, I'm not comfortable with saying. There's a lot of seriously fucked up things in this story, but in this case the combination of perspective, thoroughness, and sheer descriptiveness makes it something that would not only get me demonetized to hell and back 20 times over, but easily overshadows any other chapter's entry on the list of suffering. Really take a second to think about this. In the chapter where the main character is a dying blob of flesh that barely qualifies as a person anymore, there's a segment that makes that look like paradise. And then, well, I'll let the text speak for itself. Is it night? Can you see the stars? Oh yes. A lot of them? All of them. Are they beautiful? Yes. Thank you, Glory. For what, Blackjack? Trying. Blackjack? Sorry. I should have fought. I should have held on longer as she shook me and called my name. But I was so tired, and I could see the stars. They were calling to me. I let go, relaxed, and died. Game over. See you on the other side. What did I tell you? Once a theater kid, always a theater kid. Anyway, that is the end of the video, but if you care, there's actually something else I want to say. This bit's unscripted, so I'll just be spitballing it. I'm starting an audiobook. Yeah, the one that I used to listen to Project Horizons didn't really make it all that far, and any other ones are in accents so thick that I can't really understand them, so I thought, why not? I'm doing it myself. Link's in the description. It's on a second channel called Owen Talks, and that's really the only thing on there, but hope to see you there. Bye!